This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and his name is
The Journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is The Journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The Journey. The Journey. The Journey. The Journey.
The only journey, the only real journey, is the one within. So, that kind of brings me back to the process of getting to know oneself. That is the real journey of every human being. So today, we have another person that we truly want you to realize and feel their journey, their personal journey. Today, we have Howard alumnus, South Memphis, born and raised resident out of Memphis, Tennessee. We have Mr. Leroy Norton Jr. How you doing, Leroy?
I'm doing great, man.
Good. So let's go back. Tell me about the early years in the household and things like that when you were coming up.
Okay, so I grew up in South Memphis. Elliston Heights was what it's called.
Okay.
I grew up with mom, dad there in the house.
Okay, no sisters and brothers?
4 sisters.
Uh-oh.
And I'm the youngest. And the only boy and the baby, so you can imagine what that was like.
Oh, you were well taken care of.
Right. As my sisters would say, I was spoiled.
Oh, yeah.
But it was like growing up in the house with 5 mothers.
Okay. Oh, I bet it was. It was. So tell me about the relationship between you and your dad.
So my dad was present. He was a recruiter in the Navy, so we never had to move, but he did a lot of traveling because he was recruiting for the Navy. So he was there most of my formative years until he had to travel.
Okay. So you was a military brat that didn't have to go too far.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, who outside of your parents, and I want to say your 4 other mothers, who had the biggest impact on you as a kid growing up?
Well, I grew up in the church.
Okay.
So, my pastors and those leaders that were there in the church probably had a big influence in my formative years. And so back then as well, school systems were different, so teachers had big influence in my development.
Any story that you can tell me about a person that had an impact on your life that they probably don't know? Give them a shout out a little bit.
Okay, well, that would probably be, again, going back to the church, the pastor that was there. He and his wife took.
Who were they?
I grew up in St. Peter Baptist Church there in South Memphis on Pillar Street off Parkway. Okay. And the pastor then was Reverend C.J. Gaston and his wife, Louise Gaston. Okay. My dad was a hunter and a fisherman, so he taught me how to fish. Didn't care for hunting, but the pastor there took time to take me and his wife fishing twice a month on Saturdays. Wow. And I don't know why I was the one kid that they liked to take fishing. Right. Now, the pastor never went fishing with us, but he dropped me and his wife off at the lake every other Saturday or so, hanging out fishing. And so that impressed me that he cared enough about not only my soul, but my personal life. And he probably, and he's gone on now, but he probably never knew what that meant to me as a kid, that he took the time outside of the pulpit.
Fantastic. This is the journey on the KUDZUKIAN network. So let me see, every kid, I know when I was a kid, I used to think about who I wanted to be when I grew up. Well, who was that? I wanted to be a great basketball player. How different are you as an adult from the person you dreamed you would be as a kid?
Well, I'm pretty spot on.
Oh, really?
I think I knew early on that I wanted to be in the medical field.
Okay.
And oddly enough, I'm an optometrist by profession, but I never was taken to see an optometrist.
Oh, wow. So you knew nothing about optometry?
I knew nothing about optometry until at Hamilton we had to do a science fair project.
Okay.
And I did my science fair project on eyes.
Okay.
And part of the research was going to Southern College of Optometry here in the city,
right,
which is where I graduated from.
Oh, fantastic.
And doing that research for that science fair project on eyes, that's when my development into optometry started, when that journey started down that road. But I kind of knew I was destined to do something in the medical field.
Yeah, that's sort of like me. I ended up with chemistry degree and then decided to go into pharmaceuticals.
Okay. Gotcha.
So there's got to be a time in your life when things seem like you were like, okay, I think I can do this. Things are going to be okay. Do you remember around that time that happened for you?
Well, you asked about family. My mother played a huge role in my development, even though, again, my dad was in the house. He did a lot of traveling, but my mother played a huge role, and both of my parents are deceased now. Okay. But my mother's role in my life and in all of my siblings' life, I think my mother had this sixth sense.
Okay.
To know what each of her children was destined to do.
Really?
And me and one of my sisters are in the medical field.
Okay.
And I can remember growing up when all of my buddies were outside playing in the street like we did, playing football and basketball, shooting marbles.
Right.
In the summertime, my mother had me and my sister that's a nurse.
Right.
In the summer, she and I were being tutored by a Latin teacher that my mother had found because she had, for some reason, identified these are my two kids that are going to be in the field of medicine.
Right.
And instead of being outside playing with my buddies, I was inside learning Latin because she knew that Latin was going to help us in our careers.
Right. I mean,
in the medical field.
Preparation for the medical field.
Absolutely. I didn't understand it then.
Yeah.
But
man, what foresight. Right. She Nostrid Mama.
Right.
Nostrid Mama.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me, what's your why? Why do you get up every day and fight the good fight?
Well, my why is, again, I go back to my mother. My mother instilled in me that someday you're going to grow up and be a husband and a father yourself.
Right.
So it's all about family.
Right.
Me providing for my wife and my kids.
Okay.
And I have two kids. They're both adults now, and they're still on their journey.
On their journey.
Right. And we're trying to help them out as best we can.
Now, what about the missus? What does she do?
So the wife is a chaplain for Methodist health system. So she's her journey. When we first got married, she's a school teacher,
right? And
we kind of made the decision that she was going to stay home with the kids.
Right.
I worked, provided, and then after the last one got done with high school, probably middle school, she actually changed careers because she felt a call to ministry. So she went back to school and got her master's and doctorate degree in ministry. So that's what she is doing as she was a hospice chaplain at one time, and now she is the chaplain manager there at Methodist University.
So church plays a tremendous role.
Church plays a tremendous role in the Norton household.
Fantastic. So I got one last question for this segment, and I'm just going to take you back. Do you remember the first time that you realized you were black?
Well, I think that probably would take me back to...
Well, hold on for a quick second. Listen, we're going to be back on the journey. On the second segment, we're going to find out exactly when Brother Leroy Norton Jr. found out that he was a little different than some other folk. So stay right there. We'll be right back on the journey after these messages.
Riffin' on jazz.
Nice.
That's the way to start a show.
That is the way to start a show.
Now, what's this LL Cool J about?
LL Cool J is an acronym. I love acronyms. This acronym stands for Ladies Love Cool Jazz.
Riffin' on jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
Welcome back to The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we're going to finish our conversation with Mr. Leroy Norton Jr. So before we left, we were talking about Leroy's experience where he found out that he was black. So can you finish your story?
Sure. Well, I think, guess if we can start with, I grew up with both of my parents in the home.
Right.
I never realized that we were poor.
Right.
Because my parents took care of us. All our needs were met.
Right.
So I think I learned probably that I was black from my grandmother, my maternal grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And that's because she was a housekeeper for a white, just so happened, eye care provider. he was an ophthalmologist, right. And she was a housekeeper for him. She took probably 2-3 buses to get from her home in South Memphis to clean his house. And as I grew up, I knew that's what she did for a living, but probably around my high school years when I actually had an opportunity to go with my mom on some occasions to drop her off at her place of work. And I realized that houses in East Memphis were a whole lot different than the houses
in South Memphis.
And of course, you know, we have a TV in the home, so I know that there's a difference between whites and blacks, but I never realized the difference in how we lived.
Right.
So I think that was probably my first kind of experience with saying, okay, black people are different than white people, even though we were poor but didn't know it. But people are living differently over on this side of town.
Right.
And I always reflect back on my grandmother when I would go to her home. Now, she lived at Trigg in Mississippi on Edith Street in a shotgun house. But when you entered my grandmother's house and we would go over there for dinner, she would serve us just like she served that doctor that she worked for. That was my experience of learning how to eat at a restaurant.
Right.
Because my grandmother had the water glass, the spoon, the fork, the knife, exactly where it was supposed to be.
Right.
And so when we were there dining with her, I didn't realize it, but it was not until later on when I became an adult, she showed us how to be able to eat and conversate because she treated us just like she served the people that she worked for.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great story. So let's go back to the childhood. In the second segment, we always unpack what we talked about in the first segment. Give me some details around home life. You said you talked about being at home, mother, father, 4 sisters. Give me a story of a time you remember at home that really stands out to you. Maybe a holiday or something like that was impactful to your life.
Well, Christmas was always a fun time for us. So we had just the family traditions of Christmas time. My parents did what typically all parents do. You wrap gifts. We went to bed waiting on Santa and all of that. In our home, it was always you thought you weren't going to get anything. Right. But then
a lump of coal in the stocking.
Right. But then there you wake up. Right. And there you have it. So, just those traditions of having those things that we wanted that our parents probably waited until Christmas time.
When did you realize that there wasn't a Santa Claus?
I was probably still in elementary school. And, the last one is always the one that it gets spoiled for.
Right.
The sister above me is the one who was always the troublemaker. So she was like, dude, you still believe in Santa Claus? Right. So she kind of ruined it for me. But, but the Christmas tradition.
I got in trouble. I got in trouble for telling my little cousin it wasn't Santa Claus. He got mad and started crying. Right. Went to my auntie and I got in trouble for that. I'll never forget that one. So that was a beautiful time. What was a not so beautiful time in your childhood coming up in South Memphis?
Let's see. I had a great childhood.
Did y'all have a bully in the neighborhood?
We probably had plenty of we had plenty of bullies, but and the bully was probably the next door neighbor who was the adult.
Oh wow.
Because she was like the mean
neighbor,
nosy neighbor who told our parents when we got into trouble. Of course, growing up, I was probably the good kid, so I didn't get in a lot of trouble. I can probably only remember one fight that I had growing up. So, in actuality, my life.
So what caused the fight? What brought the fight on?
I don't even really remember what the fight was about. I just remember he had a bloody nose and I didn't.
Right. So you won that one.
Right. So I won that one. Right. So, but my growing up years, typically, we didn't have a lot, so we played football in the street.
Right.
We shot marbles. We, kind of we didn't have a lot, so we made go-karts. We would go over to the Army depot where they had just, they had a place where they would just dump pallets, and we would walk over there and get wood and just be creative. I grew up in the era where we had the skates with the key, and you had to stick your foot in there and lock it down. And when that broke, you take the skates and put them on the end of a board, and then you had there you go, or a go-kart.
Right.
So, the street we lived on had a little hill, so we were creative.
Right.
Everybody kind of, just hung in there and fought the good fight.
You had an amazing childhood. When you make the transition from the younger age to, say, high school, because you went to Hamilton, right?
Right.
Tell us about those days. What was it like when you made that transition to high school?
So I was probably one of those weird kids that just liked school.
Right.
So I liked school, and again, going back to my mother. So one thing my mother always taught us, that if you can believe that you can do it, you can do it.
Right.
So dream big.
Right.
And I remember that kind of stuck with me, because I remember growing up, by me being the only boy in our 3-bedroom home, I had my own room because I was the only boy.
Right.
As my sisters grew up and left, but I had my own room and they shared rooms. But the fact that my mother told me I could be whatever I wanted to be, so I can see myself in my room practicing being a doctor. Now, I didn't know what kind of doctor I wanted to be, but at that time, I was practicing, and I think I knew early on, because now I am in private practice now.
Right.
So I had that business kind of pulling.
Right.
So I was in my room pretending that I was a businessman, or I was pretending to be a doctor, because my mother told me, if you can see yourself doing it, You can do it.
You can do it. You can do it. Transition to college, because I'm saying everything is Memphis based. Everything is Memphis focused, church focused, home focused, family focused. How in the world did a brother from South Memphis end up in Washington, D.C. at Howard University?
That's a good question. Because in this story, I never made a visit to Howard University. I only saw
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen. I knew when I saw Howard University as an option when they had school fairs at Hamilton. A Howard representative came, and I liked Howard, so I was like, that's where I want to go.
Really?
So
never been out of Memphis. Never lived out of Memphis.
Never lived out of Memphis.
So your first day at Howard University, what was that like?
That was an experience. Because my dad told my mom, and again, I'm the baby, the only boy, never been outside of Memphis. My dad told my mom, put that boy on a plane and let him go. Let him grow up. And my mom said, I am not letting my baby go to D.C. by himself.
Right.
So as it turned out, again, my mother is, she's got that sixth sense.
Right.
So we packed up, got my stuff together, went to D.C. Like typical HBCUs, they are not the most organized. So when I showed up on campus,
they ain't had no paperwork.
No paper. They were like, Leroy Norton, who? So I had no dorm.
Oh, Lord. I know your mother was like, see?
Yeah. Right. So they knew they had accepted me as a student. So I had the acceptance letter.
Right.
But no dorm. And I was not the only one in that position. Wow. So when I got there, they put us up in a hotel because they had forgot all of us that they didn't assign dorms to. So got there, and so got in the hotel in this temporary housing.
Right.
I think my mom stayed a week with me. She found a hotel to stay in, and so I was on campus. So when she finally made the decision that I think he's safe, I can go back home, I remember specifically we were on in front of the cafeteria.
Right.
She called a taxi and they picked her up, and I could see her in the taxi wiping tears from her eyes because I'm thinking she's dropped her baby off.
Right.
And I was about to get a little teary until I saw some females coming down the street.
Let's get right.
And I said, okay, we got to get this thing together. So I can't be standing down on this campus getting ready to cry because my mama's leaving. So,
wow.
So again, mom comes to the rescue, and, you know, Howard was a great experience.
So would it be safe to say you're a mama's boy?
Probably was a mama's boy. Right.
All right. So you go to Howard. I'm sure you had an amazing time at Howard. Any fraternities, sororities?
Did not pledge a fraternity, but because I got those church roots in me, and being a part of church, I was in the choir and all of that. I'm not a soloist by any means, but grew up in the choir, and that was familiar with me. So one day I was walking across the yard on my way back to my dorm, left the dining hall, and I heard this magnificent sound coming out of the chapel.
Wow.
And I was like, that's my connection. And so I went to where that sound was coming from, and they happened to have auditions for the gospel choir there. So I didn't pledge a fraternity, but I pledged gospel choir, right?
I heard it could be tough.
Right.
The band and the choir, boy.
Right. So I was a part of that, formed some great relationships that I have to this day. Some of my best friends are part of that group.
You made it back to Memphis.
Made it back to Memphis.
Why Memphis?
Well, part of my destination, I believed, was to be in private practice, and Memphis was where I thought that private practice was going to be. So after finishing Howard, applied to optometry school.
Did you only apply Southern College of Optometry?
Only applied to Southern College of Optometry.
Wow, so you was always coming back home.
Always focused. And if you look in my high school yearbook, they have in the yearbook, what do you want to be when you grow up? Is listed optometrist.
Wow.
So I knew that was the destiny for me. Had a few, I thought at some point when I was at Howard, I may want to be a pediatrician, but spent a couple of times at Howard University Hospital following pediatricians, decided that wasn't for me. So back to my connection, applied to optometry school at Southern College of Optometry, got accepted, and came back home.
Wow. So listen, what you just heard right here is someone who set a plan for their life. And they kept, they had to stay the course. Now, I'm sure you had some ups and downs along the way.
Yep.
But what that says to me is that if you stay the course and believe in yourself, dreams do come true. So let me ask you, you came back to Memphis. What is Memphis community giving to you?
Well, actually, the Memphis community helped develop my practice because I finished optometry school in 87 and I could remember one of the courses as a senior in optometry school. We have this course that's taught that one of the professors kind of takes about 6 of the students, and it's a development course to help you plan what you want to do. And he said to the rest of my group that Leroy Norton is probably going to be the richest one of all of you.
Wow.
And I'm the only black male in my class. So there were 3 other blacks in my class of 100.
Right.
But I'm the only male in there. I guess the only boy in my family, the only male in this optometry school. So he said, and I didn't understand it at the time that that's what he was saying. But what he was saying was that I'm the only black in Memphis that's going to be in private practice.
Right.
So Memphis, as being the only black optometrist in private practice, it was a springboard for other blacks to support a black business.
Right.
Now, I realize that everybody that's black is not going to end up in my office, but it was an opportunity for blacks to support a black optometrist.
So you were the first African-American optometrist that had a private practice in Memphis?
To my knowledge, yeah.
Wow. So you're looking at black history right here on the journey, black history. So if you had a chance to go back and talk to that younger self that was sitting in South Memphis, what would you say to him?
I would probably say to him that you did a good job of listening to the influential people in your life, which were your teachers, and most of all, your parents. And again, it's ringing in my head. My mother said, if you can see yourself doing it, you can do it. So I would say to those young people that are considering whatever career path that you want to take, if you can see yourself doing it, you can do it. Now, that's different from what we hear all the time. They say you can be whatever you want to be.
Right.
I kind of take, well, no, you really can't.
Right.
Because
but
if you can see yourself doing it and you make the proper preparation, then you can accomplish that goal.
We don't need to say another word. Listen, you've been watching or listening to The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we've had the journey of Mr. Leroy Norton Jr. Listen, come back, because each time we're going to bring you another amazing Memphis story. So till next time, once again, I'm your host, Larry Robinson. For our guest, Mr. Leroy Norton, you've been listening to The Journey. You've been watching The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Take care.
The Journey, hosted by Larry Robinson. Executive producer, the Delta Boulay.